He hadn't spoken in 8 years, but he'd seen everything, and what he knew could destroy his father's empire. The program booklets rustled like autumn leaves as I stacked them on my registration table, straightening each one with practiced precision. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel glittered with chandeliers that cast crystalline reflections across polished marble floors. It smelled of expensive perfume, fresh orchids, and that particular scent of wealth, a subtle mixture of power and entitlement that seemed to hang in the air like invisible smoke. "Registration packet, please," a woman in emerald silk said without looking at me, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she extended one manicured hand. She didn't wait for my response, already turning to continue her conversation as if I were nothing but a piece of furniture designed to dispense programs. I was used to it by now. 3 years of working children's charity events in Chicago had taught me that invisibility came with the volunteer badge. My thrift store blazer and Target blouse were a stark contrast to the designer gowns surrounding me, marking me as clearly as a neon sign. My feet already ached in the sensible flats I'd worn, knowing I'd be standing for the next 6 hours at this Children's Hospital Foundation gala. I'd taken this volunteer position because it looked good on my resume. Child psychologist specializing in nonverbal communication needed all the networking opportunities she could get. My small practice in Pilsen barely covered rent, and events like these put me in front of people who could actually afford private therapy sessions. "Ms. Romano, could you direct the Sanderson family to table 12? My coordinator, Patricia, breezed past with a clipboard clutched like a shield. "And we'll need you to help with the silent auction monitoring in about 20 minutes. I nodded, scanning the room for the Sandersons, when my gaze snagged on something that made me pause. A boy, maybe 12 or 13, sat alone at a corner table near the kitchen service doors. While other children chased each other around the dance floor in their Sunday best, laughing and showing off, he remained perfectly still. His small hands moved with meticulous precision, folding white cloth napkins into intricate origami cranes. One crane, then another, then another. Each fold was exact, each crease sharp enough to cut. His small face was locked in concentration, dark eyebrows furrowed over deep brown eyes that never strayed from his work. I counted 7 finished cranes lined up before him in perfect symmetry, before I realized what had caught my attention wasn't just his solitude, it was the way every adult in his vicinity seemed to look through him, past him, around him, as if he didn't exist. "That's the Costanza boy," a voice said beside me. I turned to find Patricia, her expression a mixture of pity and discomfort. Shame, really. Such a powerful father, such a challenged child. The casual dismissal in her tone made my jaw tighten. Challenged how? She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Hasn't spoken a word in years. Some kind of selective mutism, they say. His father is Giovanni Costanza. You know who that is, right?" I did. Everyone in Chicago knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Giovanni Costanza owned half the city's commercial real estate, sat on the boards of a dozen charities, and had his photograph in the Tribune's business section regularly. He also had rumors attached to his name that newspapers were too afraid to print. Underground connections, money that moved through shadows, the kind of power that made problems disappear. "The boy witnessed his mother's death," Patricia continued, clearly relishing having information I didn't. "Home invasion when he was only 4. Hasn't spoken since. Giovanni brings him to these events, but..." She trailed off with a delicate shrug. "No one quite knows what to do with a child like that. It makes people uncomfortable." A child like that. I'd heard that phrase too many times in my career. It never stopped making me angry. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers, overly enthusiastic and bright. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our beloved parent-child dance. Parents, bring your kids to the floor and let's see those moves." The dance floor flooded with laughing families. Fathers lifted daughters onto their feet. Mothers swayed with sons who pretended embarrassment, but secretly loved the attention. I watched the boy, Luca, I'd later learn his name was, look up from his origami. His dark eyes tracked the dancing pairs with an expression I recognized from years of working with traumatized children. Longing, loss, the kind of hunger for normalcy that has no words. A tall man in an immaculate charcoal suit appeared at Luca's table. Even from across the ballroom, Giovanni Costanza's presence was magnetic. Dark hair silvered at the temples, a face carved from sharp angles and harder decisions. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder and leaned down, speaking quietly. Luca nodded at whatever his father said. Then 3 men in dark suits materialized beside Giovanni. Security clearly, their bulk and watchful eyes unmistakable. One leaned in close, whispered urgently. Giovanni's jaw tightened. He looked at his son, then at the men, torn in a way that made something in my chest ache. He squeezed Luca's shoulder once, apology and promise combined, and left. Just like that, the boy was alone again while all around him, children danced with their parents. I should have stayed at my registration table, should have minded my own business, should have remembered that people like Giovanni Costanza didn't appreciate strangers approaching their children. But I've never been good at should. I crossed the ballroom in my discount heels, weaving through dancing families, until I reached his table. Up close, I could see the precision of his origami was even more impressive. These weren't simple folds. These were complex, mathematical creations that required spatial reasoning most adults didn't possess. I knelt beside his chair, bringing myself to his eye level. He didn't look at me. His hands continued their methodical folding. I raised my hands and signed. "Hello. My name is Calith." His hands froze mid-fold. Slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, his eyes shifted. Not to my face. Children like Luca often struggled with direct eye contact, but to my hands. I continued signing, "Your cranes are beautiful. You're very talented." For several heartbeats, nothing. The music swelled, couples twirled, the world kept spinning, then his small hands moved, hesitant but precise. "Thank you." My heart jumped. He knew ASL. Someone had taught him to communicate, which meant someone saw him as more than broken. I signed again. "Would you like to dance?" "I know I'm not your papa, but I'm a pretty good substitute. I only step on toes sometimes." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough to count as a miracle. He looked at the dance floor, then back at my hands, uncertainty written across his features. I kept my hands where he could see them, gave him space to decide. One thing I'd learned working with nonverbal kids: you never push. You offer, then wait. Always wait. Luca carefully set down his half-folded napkin. He stood, smoothing his suit jacket with the same precision he'd used on the origami. Then he placed his small hand in mine. Together, we walked onto the dance floor. I didn't know the steps to whatever formal dance the other families were attempting, so I did what I do with all my young patients. I made it up. We swayed side to side. I spun him under my arm. He executed the turn perfectly, and this time, a real smile broke across his face. Around us, conversations died. Phones appeared. I felt the weight of dozens of eyes, heard the whispered questions. Who is that woman? Why is she dancing with the Costanza boy? Look, he's actually smiling. Let them stare. This child deserved to dance. The song ended too soon. Luca stepped back and signed, "Thank you." "That was nice. You're very welcome," I signed back. "Maybe we can dance again sometime?" He nodded, then returned to his table and his origami, as if our dance had been a beautiful dream he was already folding back into memory. I made it halfway across the ballroom before a wall of muscle in a dark suit blocked my path. Miss. His voice was all gravel and authority. Mr. Costanza would like your business card. My stomach dropped and soared simultaneously. I don't have one on me, I managed, but I can write down my information. He handed me a phone, the expensive kind with a screen that probably cost more than my laptop. I typed in my name, practice address, and cell number with trembling fingers. The security guard took back the phone without another word and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, heart hammering, watching as Luca folded another crane. He looked up once, caught my eye across the ballroom, and signed something small and quick. Goodbye, Caliph. He knew my name. He'd remembered my name. That night, I sat in my studio apartment researching Giovanni Costanza until my eyes burned. The official story was impressive. Self-made billionaire, philanthropist, devoted single father. Built his commercial real estate empire from nothing after immigrating from Italy at 19. Donated millions to children's hospitals, schools, community centers. But the unofficial story, the one whispered in Reddit threads and true crime forums, was darker. Money laundering, protection rackets, connections to families whose last names ended in vowels and whose business dealings never quite made it to court. The articles always ended the same way. No charges ever filed, no evidence ever found, just smoke, shadows, and the kind of power that made accusations disappear. And somewhere in that empire of beautiful buildings and dangerous secrets was a boy who hadn't spoken in 8 years. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. The message was brief. Mr. Costanza requests a meeting to discuss services for his son. Thursday, 2 p.m. A car will collect you from your practice. Please confirm. I stared at the screen for a long time. Every instinct screamed, this was a terrible idea. You don't get involved with men like Giovanni Costanza. You don't enter their world. You definitely don't bring your questions about what really happened 8 years ago to a man who makes problems vanish. But I kept seeing Luca's small hands signing thank you, kept remembering the way he'd smiled when we danced. I texted back, confirmed. Then I lay awake until dawn, wondering what I'd just agreed to. The black Mercedes arrived at my practice exactly at 1:30 p.m. Thursday afternoon, not 1:29, not 1:31, exactly on time, because men like Giovanni Costanza didn't do approximations. The driver was the same security guard from the gala, the human wall who'd demanded my business card. Up close in daylight, I could see the scar running along his jawline and the slight bulge under his jacket that probably wasn't a cell phone. Miss Romano. He opened the rear door. I'm Anton, head of Mr. Costanza's security team. Caliph is fine, I said, sliding into leather seats that smelled like money and secrets. The drive took 40 minutes, leading us away from the city's heart and into the kind of neighborhood where the houses hid behind stone walls and iron gates. Old money. The type that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew it was there. We turned onto a private drive flanked by ancient oak trees. The gates opened silently as we approached. Someone was watching, always watching, and suddenly the trees parted to reveal the Costanza estate. I'd expected ostentatious. Marble columns and gold fixtures, and the kind of wealth that screamed, look at me. Instead, I found something more unsettling. Beauty without warmth. The house was modern Italian architecture, all clean lines and dark stone, with massive windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It should have been stunning. It was stunning. But something about the perfection felt hollow, like a museum designed to look like a home, but never quite achieving it. Armed men patrolled the grounds in a choreographed pattern. Security cameras tracked our approach with mechanical precision. This wasn't a house. This was a fortress pretending to be a residence. Anton opened my door. Mr. Costanza is waiting in his study. This way, please. The entrance hall had soaring ceilings and floors of polished marble that echoed our footsteps. Modern art pieces, the kind I'd seen in galleries with 5-figure price tags, adorned walls painted in muted grays. Everything was immaculate. Everything was expensive. Nothing was personal. No family photos, no casual clutter, no signs that a child lived here, let alone a child who built origami worlds when the real one became too loud. We climbed a sweeping staircase to the second floor. Anton knocked twice on a heavy wooden door, waited for a response I couldn't hear, then opened it. "Miss Romano, sir." The study was exactly what I'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a massive desk that probably cost more than my car, and windows offering a view of the lake that looked like a painting. Giovanni Costanza stood with his back to us, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. Even from behind, his presence dominated the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating the kind of authority that made you straighten your spine without realizing it. He ended the call mid-sentence, turned, and suddenly I understood why powerful people returned his calls within minutes. The photographs hadn't captured it. The intensity in his dark eyes, the way his attention focused on you like a spotlight, the sense that he was cataloging every detail of your existence in the span of a breath. "Miss Romano." His voice carried traces of an accent that expensive education hadn't quite erased. "Thank you for coming." "Caliph, please." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "And thank you for the invitation, Mr. Costanza." "Giovanni." A slight smile touched his mouth, not quite warm, but not cold either. "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be great." He nodded to Anton, who disappeared silently. Giovanni gestured to a seating area by the windows, leather chairs that probably cost more than my entire practice's furniture budget combined. I sat, acutely aware of my Target blouse and secondhand blazer in this room where everything whispered wealth. "I'll be direct," Giovanni said, settling into the chair across from me with controlled grace. "I saw the security footage from the gala. You approached my son. You used sign language," he responded. My stomach tightened. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. I work with nonverbal children, and I saw he was alone during the parent dance. I just thought, you thought a child deserved kindness." He cut me off, but not unkindly. "You were correct." Anton returned with a silver tray bearing coffee and cups too delicate for my clumsy hands. I accepted one carefully, buying time to process. "Luca has therapists," Giovanni continued. "Speech pathologists, behavioral specialists, occupational therapists, a team of experts with credentials from the best universities in the country." He paused, something painful flickering across his features. Yet in 4 years of treatment, I have never seen him smile the way he smiled when you danced with him. The raw honesty in his admission caught me off guard. "Sometimes credentials aren't what matters," I said quietly. "Sometimes what matters is seeing the child, not the diagnosis." His dark eyes studied me with unsettling intensity. "That is why I asked you here. I want to hire you as Luca's private therapist. 3 sessions per week, here at the estate. Name your rate." My coffee cup rattled slightly against its saucer. "Mr. Costanza, Giovanni, I appreciate the offer, but I already have a full caseload. My practice. I will compensate you for any clients you need to reschedule. Additionally, I'll make a substantial donation to your practice, enough to hire an associate, expand your services, reach more children who need help." He leaned forward slightly. "My son needs you specifically, not your credentials. You." The offer was staggering, life-changing, the kind of financial security I'd dreamed about during my student loan payments and sleepless nights wondering if I could make rent. But this was Giovanni Costanza, the man whose name appeared in those dark Reddit threads, whose business dealings existed in shadows and whispers. I need to think about it, I said carefully. Of course. He stood, extending his hand. But before you decide, would you like to meet Luca again? See where he spends his time? I should have said no. Should have taken the night to research, to think, to talk myself out of entering this world. Instead, I found myself nodding. Giovanni's smile was slight but genuine. Follow me. We left the study and walked down a long hallway lined with more expensive art and empty walls. The silence felt heavy, broken only by our footsteps and the distant hum of security systems. He stopped at a door painted deep blue, the only splash of real color I'd seen in the entire house. Blue is his favorite, Giovanni said, noticing my observation. It calms him. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. A pattern, a code, a way of saying, I'm here, I'm safe, it's okay to let me in. Come in, Papa, called a clear voice from inside. Wait. My brain stuttered to a stop. A voice. Luca's voice. I must have made a sound because Giovanni turned to me, his expression shifting to something that might have been sympathy. He speaks, Giovanni said quietly. Here, in his safe spaces, with people he trusts completely. Selective mutism, the doctors call it. He's not incapable of speech. He simply chooses when and where to use it. The revelation rearranged everything I thought I knew. Giovanni pushed open the door, revealing a room that was pure childhood magic, despite the mansion's coldness. The space was organized into distinct zones. A reading nook with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a study area with a child-sized desk, a building station with elaborate Lego constructions, and a cozy bed area with star-patterned bedding. Luca sat cross-legged on a plush carpet, surrounded by hundreds of origami creations arranged in careful patterns. He looked up as we entered, his gaze settling somewhere near my shoulder. Hello, Luca, I said softly. Remember me? We danced at the gala. His hands moved before his voice. Hello, Caliph. Then, tentatively, you came back. The sound of his voice, young, uncertain, but present, made my throat tight. I did, I confirmed. Your papa invited me to see your beautiful room. He stood with the same careful precision I'd noticed before. Would you like to see my books? I have 412. I'd love to. For the next 20 minutes, Luca showed me his treasures. His collection was extraordinary. Everything from illustrated encyclopedias to advanced texts on astronomy and marine biology. He spoke quietly but clearly, his knowledge impressive for any child, let alone a 12-year-old. This one explains bioluminescence in deep-sea creatures, he said, pulling out a book clearly intended for college students. The chemical reactions are fascinating. It's oxidation of luciferin molecules catalyzed by luciferase enzymes. I glanced at Giovanni, who stood slightly apart, watching his son with an expression of fierce pride mixed with profound sadness. That's amazing, Luca, I said. You understand all of that? He nodded matter-of-factly. Papa says I can be anything I want when I grow up, a marine biologist or an astronaut. I haven't decided yet. You have plenty of time to choose. He showed me his origami next. Not just cranes, but complex geometric sculptures, modular designs that required dozens of folded units locked together. Each piece was labeled with a date and a title written in careful script. This one is called The Day Mama Left, he said, pointing to an intricate piece made from black paper. I made it on her birthday last year. The casual mention of his trauma, folded into paper and dated like a scientific specimen, cracked something in my chest. It's beautiful, I said honestly. Your mama would be proud of you. His expression flickered, grief passing across his young face like a shadow. Papa says she watches from heaven. I don't know if I believe in heaven, but I hope he's right. Giovanni's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Luca, Giovanni interjected gently. Kalith needs to return to her practice soon. Is there anything else you'd like to show her? Luca considered this seriously. Just one thing. He crossed to his desk and carefully opened a drawer, removing something wrapped in blue silk. With deliberate movements, he unwrapped it to reveal a small music box made of polished wood. This was Mama's, he explained. Papa gave it to me to keep safe. He wound the key at the base and opened the lid. A haunting melody filled the room. Swan Lake, I recognized after a moment. Mama was a dancer, Luca said softly. Before she met Papa, she danced to this song in a performance once. Papa showed me the video. The music box played its melancholy tune while Giovanni stared out the window, his back rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. When the melody faded, Luca carefully rewrapped the box and returned it to its drawer. He turned to me, his gaze finding a point just past my ear. Will you come back again? To visit? The question was so hopeful, so achingly vulnerable, that I found myself answering before my brain could catch up. Yes, I'd like that very much. His almost smile appeared. Good. Next time I'll show you my telescope. Papa bought me one that can see Jupiter's moons. Giovanni walked me back downstairs, his silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. At the front door, he finally spoke. He doesn't connect with people easily. You've seen that. But he's asked about you 3 times since the gala. That's... He paused, searching for words. That's unprecedented. He's a remarkable child, I said. Brilliant and kind, and so much stronger than anyone gives him credit for. Yes. Giovanni's dark eyes held mine. Which is why I'm asking you again. Will you work with him? Not to fix him, he's not broken, but to help him navigate a world that doesn't understand children like him. Behind us, through the house's perfect windows, I could see Luca's blue door. Could imagine him inside, folding paper memories and cataloging the stars. 3 sessions a week, I heard myself say. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, 4 to 6 p.m., and I want full autonomy over therapeutic approach, no interference from you or your other specialists. Something that might have been respect flickered across Giovanni's features. Agreed. One more condition. I straightened my spine, forcing myself to maintain eye contact with a man who'd probably negotiated deals worth millions. Whatever you do in your business, whatever rumors are true or false, they stay outside those therapy sessions. When I'm with Luca, he gets my complete focus. Not your empire, not your reputation, just him. For a long moment, Giovanni studied me with that intense gaze that seemed to peel back layers. Then he extended his hand. You have my word. His grip was firm, warm, and gone too quickly. Anton appeared to drive me home, but as we walked toward the car, Giovanni called out, Kalith? I turned. Thank you. The words were simple, but the weight behind them suggested they didn't come easily to a man like him. For seeing my son when others look away. I didn't trust myself to respond, so I just nodded and followed Anton to the Mercedes. As we drove away from the estate, I watched the fortress walls disappear in the side mirror and wondered what I'd just agreed to. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. First session scheduled for Tuesday, 4 p.m. Anton will collect you at 3:30. TC. Below that, a notification from my bank app. I opened it and nearly dropped my phone. A wire transfer. $50,000. The memo line read, Practice Expansion Fund and first month retainer. $50,000. For a month of work. I stared at the number until the zeros blurred. Then I saved Giovanni's contact and texted back, See you Tuesday. That night, I lay awake researching selective mutism, trying not to think about the sadness in Giovanni's eyes when his son mentioned heaven, or the way Luca's voice had sounded saying my name, or the fact that I'd just tied my life to a family wrapped in beautiful mysteries and dangerous secrets. Somewhere in a fortress by the lake, a boy was probably folding paper, counting stars, and carrying burdens no child should have to bear. And somehow, impossibly, I'd just promised to help him carry them. 2 months transformed everything. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons became the rhythm of my week. Saturday mornings, too, though Giovanni initially protested weekend sessions until I explained that routine mattered more than convenience. Anton collected me with clockwork precision. The drive became familiar. The security checks at the gate stopped feeling invasive. Even the fortress-like mansion began to feel less like a museum and more like what it actually was. A home where a lonely boy tried to build normal from origami and star charts. Luca flourished. That's the only word for it. In 8 weeks, the solemn child who'd signed thank you at the gala became someone entirely different, still methodical, still precise, but increasingly willing to let me into his carefully ordered world. We worked on advanced ASL during our sessions, but that was just the framework. The real therapy happened in the spaces between signs. He showed me his art, not just origami, but detailed pencil drawings that captured faces with photographic accuracy. He'd drawn Anton mid-laugh, an expression I'd never actually seen on the security chief's face. He'd drawn the cook, Maria, sneaking cookies when she thought no one was watching. He'd drawn his father in profile, staring out windows with an expression that looked like longing. "You're incredibly talented," I told him during our 5th session, studying a portrait he'd made of a woman I assumed was his mother. The detail was stunning. Every eyelash, every subtle emotion in her smile. "I remember her exactly," Luca said, his voice quiet but steady in the safety of his room. "Every detail. The doctors said that's unusual for someone who was only 4. But I do. I remember everything about that day." My chest tightened. "Do you want to talk about it?" He considered this with his characteristic seriousness. "Not yet. Maybe someday. Papa says I should talk when I'm ready, not when other people think I should be." "Your papa is right." Luca's relationship with his father was complicated in ways that broke my heart. The love was obvious. The way Giovanni's entire demeanor softened when Luca entered a room. The way Luca tracked his father's movements like a compass finding north. But underneath that love lived fear. Not fear of Giovanni. Fear for him. I noticed it in small moments. The way Luca tensed when his father's phone rang with certain ringtones. The way he watched the security monitors in his room. Yes, he had access to the estate's camera feeds, something that should have concerned me more than it did. The way he asked careful questions about where his father was going, when he'd return, whether Anton would be with him. "Papa has dangerous work sometimes," Luca told me once, matter of fact. "People want to hurt him because he's powerful. I worry about that." "Does he talk to you about his work?" "No, but I notice things. Adults think I don't understand because I don't always talk, but I understand everything." His dark eyes, so much like his father's, met mine briefly. "Sometimes I understand too much." The comment lodged in my chest like a splinter, but I didn't push. By week 7, Luca asked if we could invite someone to our sessions. "There's a girl at my school," he said, careful with each word. "Her name is Bree. She uses a wheelchair. Some kids are mean to her because she's different. I thought maybe she could come here sometime. We could do art together." The fact that he was thinking about another child, wanting to connect, wanting to share his space, it represented progress I'd barely dared hope for. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Let me talk to your papa about it." Which is how I ended up in Giovanni's study that evening, explaining why socialization with peers mattered for Luca's development. Giovanni sat behind his massive desk, looking every inch the powerful businessman in his tailored shirt and Italian shoes. But his attention was completely focused on me, intense and unwavering in that way that made my pulse quicken despite my best efforts. "A stranger's child," he said carefully, "in my home, with my son. A classmate's child, a girl who Luca specifically asked about. That's huge, Giovanni. That's him reaching out. And the security concerns? Background check the parents. Have Anton present. Whatever protocols make you comfortable. But don't take this away from him because you're afraid." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd called him on his fear so directly. "You don't hesitate to challenge me," he observed. "You hired me to help your son, not to agree with everything you say." A smile ghosted across his mouth. "Indeed, I did." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the lake. The late October sun cast gold across the water, painting him in warm light that softened his sharp edges. "His mother used to challenge me too," he said quietly. "Eliana, she never let me get away with using power as an excuse for being wrong." It was the first time he'd said her name in my presence, the first time he'd voluntarily mentioned her at all. Luca mentioned she was a dancer. She was magic in motion. His voice carried the weight of old grief. "We met at a charity gala, actually, not unlike the one where you met my son. She was performing with a ballet company. I was there pretending to be civilized." He turned back to me. "She saw through all of it immediately, told me I wore my power like armor because I was afraid of being vulnerable. She sounds wise. She was. She also believed people deserved second chances, that goodness could exist in complicated places." His dark eyes held mine. "She would have liked you." The comment shouldn't have affected me the way it did, a warm flush spreading through my chest, my breath catching slightly. This was dangerous territory. Giovanni Costanza wasn't just my employer. He was a man whose world operated by rules I didn't understand, whose reputation carried warnings I shouldn't ignore. But standing in the golden light of his study, talking about his dead wife and his son's progress, he didn't feel dangerous. He felt human, lonely, like someone carrying his own unbearable weight while everyone assumed his shoulders were strong enough. "The play date," I said, steering us back to safer ground. "Can we arrange it?" "Yes, but on one condition." He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive with notes of cedar and smoke. "You'll be present. Not just as Luca's therapist, as a buffer. Social situations with new people still make him anxious." "Of course. That was already my plan." "Good." He extended his hand. "Then we have an agreement." I took his hand, expecting a brief professional shake. Instead, his fingers lingered against mine, warm and deliberate, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that felt far too intimate for an employer. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for seeing what my son needs, for pushing me when I need pushing." I pulled my hand back, my skin tingling where he'd touched it. "It's my job." "Is it?" His gaze was too knowing, seeing things I wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Because it feels like more than that, for both of us." Before I could respond, before I could examine what he meant by both of us, his phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened instantly. "I need to take this. Anton will drive you home." Just like that, the moment shattered. The businessman replaced the grieving widower. The armor clicked back into place. I left his study feeling off balance, hyper-aware of where his skin had touched mine. The playdate happened 2 weeks later on a sunny Saturday afternoon. Bree arrived with her mother, Karen, a tired-looking woman who worked 3 jobs and lit up when she saw the Costanza estate. I'd already briefed her. Yes, the family was wealthy. No, she shouldn't feel intimidated. Yes, Luca was excited to have Bree visit. What I hadn't told her was who Giovanni Costanza really was. Some truths were better left unspoken. Luca greeted Bree with careful formality, showing her his room with the same serious pride he'd shown me. Within 20 minutes, they were building an elaborate Lego city together, Bree's excited chatter filling the spaces where Luca's silence used to live. He didn't speak to her, not yet, but he signed responses that made her giggle. He showed her his origami. He let her use his favorite colored pencils. Karen and I watched from the doorway, her eyes bright with grateful tears. "He's wonderful with her," she whispered. "Most kids don't know how to act around Bree's wheelchair. They either ignore her or treat her like she's fragile. But Luca just sees her. He knows what it's like to be different," I said softly, "to be dismissed because people don't understand." We'd moved to the garden room, Luca's second favorite space, all windows and comfortable furniture, when Giovanni returned home early from a meeting. He entered with his usual commanding presence, flanked by Anton and another security guard I didn't recognize. But something was off. His jaw was tight. His movements were controlled in a way that suggested he was restraining something violent. "Caliph." His eyes found mine immediately. "A word, privately." Karen looked nervous. I gave her what I hoped was a reassuring smile and followed Giovanni to a small study adjacent to the garden room. He closed the door and leaned against it, his expression carefully blank. "There's been a situation," he said without preamble. "Nothing that concerns you directly, but I need you to be aware. Additional security measures are being implemented around the estate." Ice slid down my spine. "What kind of situation?" "A business rival making threats. Standard power plays in my world." His accent thickened slightly. I'd learned that happened when he was stressed or angry. "But I take no chances where Luca is concerned, or those connected to him." Those connected to him. The words settled over me with uncomfortable weight. "Am I in danger?" I asked directly. "No, but it would be wise to accept a security detail for the next few weeks, for you and any family you have. I live alone, no family in Chicago." I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the fear creeping up my throat. "Giovanni, what's really happening?" He studied me for a long moment, weighing something behind those dark eyes. "A man named Vincent," he finally said. "I have information that he's been making little moves against my empire, against my family and the people we care about." The fear crystallized into something sharp and cold. Why would he care about Luca's therapist? Because anyone I value becomes a potential pressure point. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, explaining the calculus of his dangerous world. "And I've made it clear that you're important to my son's well-being." "So this is my fault? For getting too close?" "No." He moved toward me, his intensity crackling in the small space. "This is my fault for believing I could keep these worlds separate, for thinking I could give Luca a normal life while operating in shadows. We stood too close in the tiny study, the air thick with everything unspoken between us. I can increase your security without disrupting Luca's routine, Giovanni continued. Anton will assign someone. You'll barely notice their presence. Armed guards following me to the grocery store? Yeah, I'll notice. Better notice than vulnerable. His jaw tightened. I've already lost too much, Caliph. I won't lose my son, and I won't allow anyone close to him to be harmed because of me. The raw protectiveness in his voice did something to my chest, made it hard to breathe properly. 1 week, I decided. I'll accept security for 1 week. If this situation isn't resolved by then, we need to pause the sessions until it is. I won't put Luca through the trauma of losing another person who matters to him. Surprise flickered across his features. You think you matter to him that much? I know I do. The same way I know he matters to me far more than a professional relationship should allow. The admission hung between us, too honest, too raw. Giovanni's hand lifted as if to touch my face, then dropped. You're right, you matter, to both of us. That's why I'll do anything to protect you. I arrived for our Tuesday session with my nerves stretched wire thin. The security presence had tripled. Guards at the gate checked my ID even though they knew exactly who I was. More cameras tracked our approach. The fortress had tightened its walls. Anton escorted me inside with his usual efficiency, but his jaw was set in a way that suggested things I didn't want to know. Mr. Costanza is in meetings all afternoon, he said as we climbed the stairs. He asked me to tell you he's sorry he can't greet you personally. Translation. Giovanni was dealing with Riker's threat and didn't want me anywhere near it. Luca waited in his room, sitting at his desk with unusual stillness. No origami, no books, just sitting, staring at his hands. Hey, I said softly, knocking on his open door. How are you doing? He looked up and my chest constricted. His eyes were shadowed, his face drawn. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I need to show you something, he said without preamble. His voice was steady but urgent. Something important. But you have to promise not to tell Papa until I've shown you everything. Every instinct screamed warning. Luca, please. His hands twisted together. Please, Calith, I've been carrying this alone and I can't anymore. But Papa won't believe me. He'll think I'm imagining things because I'm scared, but you'll understand. You always understand. The trust in his words broke something in me. Okay, I agreed, even though I knew I was probably making a terrible mistake. Show me. He stood and moved to his closet. Behind his neatly organized clothes, he pressed on a section of wall that looked identical to the rest. A hidden panel clicked open. My breath caught. Inside was a portfolio case, the kind artists use. Luca pulled it out with careful hands and carried it to his bed. I started documenting 6 months ago, he said quietly, unzipping the case. At first I thought I was being paranoid. Papa says my anxiety makes me see threats that aren't real. But then I kept noticing patterns, behaviors, things that didn't make sense. This is Riker, Papa's friend. He opened the portfolio, and my world tilted. Dozens of drawings, maybe 50 or more. Each one detailed, dated, labeled in Luca's precise handwriting. The first showed Riker standing in Giovanni's study, photographing documents on the desk. The detail was extraordinary. You could see the individual papers, the camera in Riker's hands, even the timestamp Luca had added, March 15th, 11:47 p.m. I couldn't sleep that night, Luca explained, his voice clinical, detached, a child discussing trauma like a science experiment. I was watching the security feeds from my computer. Papa doesn't know I have access, but I learned the passwords from watching Anton type them. I saw Riker come into the study when everyone was asleep. He was there for 17 minutes. He took pictures of things in Papa's safe. My hands trembled as I turned to the next drawing. This one showed Riker meeting with 2 men in suits outside an office building. The men's faces were rendered with photographic accuracy. Luca had labeled them, FBI Agent Morrison, FBI Agent Chen. I followed him once, Luca continued matter-of-factly. 3 months ago, Papa thought I was at therapy, but I asked my therapist to lie and say I was sick. Anton drove me, and I had him follow Riker's car. I drew what I saw. Luca, my voice came out strangled. You could have been hurt. If Riker knew, he doesn't see me. Adults never do. His dark eyes met mine with ancient weariness. I'm invisible because I'm quiet, because I'm broken. People say things around me they'd never say otherwise. They do things because they assume I'm not paying attention. I flipped through more drawings, my horror growing with each page. Riker meeting with men Luca labeled Costanza family rivals. Dates, times, locations, all meticulously recorded. Riker in Giovanni's office, going through file cabinets. May 3rd, 2:22 a.m., Riker having lunch with someone labeled Prosecutor Jameson. June 18th, 1:15 p.m., a timeline spanning 6 months, showing money being moved through accounts, documents being altered, meetings held in secret. He's been stealing from Papa, Luca said quietly, moving money to offshore accounts. I found the records once when I was in Papa's study. I memorized the numbers and researched them online. The accounts are in Riker's name. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. Why would he do this? Your father trusts him completely. Because Papa is powerful, and people want that power. Luca's voice was flat, reciting facts. Riker is working with the FBI and with Papa's enemies. He's going to frame Papa for crimes he didn't commit while stealing from him. Then Papa goes to prison, and Riker takes everything. The clinical way he discussed his father's potential destruction was somehow more heartbreaking than if he'd been crying. I turned to another page and froze. This drawing showed me. Walking into the estate for my first session. The date, 8 weeks ago. He's been watching you since the beginning, Luca said quietly. I noticed him following you 3 times. Once to your apartment, once to your practice, once to the grocery store. That's when I knew he was planning something bigger. You're not important to the business. You're only important because you're important to me and Papa. Ice flooded my veins. Luca, does Riker know you've been documenting this? I don't think so. But Saturday, when he showed up here, Luca's composure cracked slightly. The way he looked at me, like he was trying to figure out what I know, like he was calculating whether I was a problem. You are 12 years old, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You're a child. This should never have been your burden to carry. But it is. His eyes held mine, ancient and exhausted. Because if I don't protect Papa, who will? Everyone thinks he's invincible. But I see the truth. He's trying so hard to be better, to be good for me, and Riker is going to destroy him. The love in those words, the desperate, fierce love of a child for a parent, made my throat close. We have to tell your father, I said firmly. Right now. This is too dangerous to keep to yourself anymore. He won't believe me. Luca's voice broke. He's known Riker for 15 years. Riker saved his life twice. Papa will think I'm confused, that my anxiety is making me paranoid. He'll tell me it's okay, that I'm safe, and he'll ignore the evidence because he can't imagine his closest friend betraying him. Then we make him believe. I pulled out my phone. I'm photographing every single one of these drawings. We're building a case he can't dismiss. Luca watched as I carefully documented his artwork. 6 months of patient observation by a child who'd been ignored his entire life. Caliph? His voice was small suddenly, the clinical detachment evaporating. What, if we're too late? What if Riker's plan is already happening and we can't stop it? I lowered my phone and looked at this extraordinary boy who'd carried an empire's worth of secrets on his narrow shoulders. Then we'll face it together, I said firmly. You, me, and your father. But you're not alone anymore, Luca. You don't have to protect everyone by yourself. His eyes filled with tears he'd probably been holding back for months. I'm scared. I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. He crossed the space between us and did something he'd never done before. Initiated physical contact. His thin arms wrapped around my waist, his face pressing against my shoulder. I held him while he shook, this brilliant, observant child who'd been forced to be his father's guardian. We were still like that when the door opened. Giovanni stood in the doorway, having apparently finished his meetings early. His gaze took in the scene, his son in my arms, the drawings spread across the bed, my phone in hand. What's going on? His voice was carefully controlled, but I heard the edge beneath it. Luca pulled back, wiping his eyes. He looked at his father, then at me, then back at his father. Papa, he said quietly, I need to tell you something, and you have to promise to listen. Really listen, even if it sounds impossible. Giovanni entered the room slowly, his expression shifting from concern to wariness as his eyes landed on the open portfolio. What is that? The truth, Luca said simply. About Riker, about what he's been doing, about why I've been so scared. I watched Giovanni's face as his son, his brilliant, invisible son, began to speak, and I prayed that love would be stronger than denial. Giovanni stood frozen in the doorway of Luca's room, his dark eyes fixed on the portfolio spread across the bed like evidence at a crime scene. Papa, Luca said again, his voice steadier now. Please come in. Close the door. Something in his son's tone, the adult seriousness, the careful control, made Giovanni comply. He closed the door and moved deeper into the room, but his body language screamed tension, every muscle coiled, every instinct on alert. What is this? He asked again, his accent thickening. 6 months of documentation, I said quietly. Luca has been observing, recording, things he's seen that concerned him. Giovanni's gaze snapped to me. You knew about this? I found out 20 minutes ago. He turned back to Luca. Show me. For the next hour, Luca walked his father through the portfolio with heartbreaking precision. Each drawing, each date, each calculated observation made by a 12-year-old who'd taught himself to be invisible so he could protect the person he loved most. Giovanni's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, denial, and finally, devastatingly, a kind of horrified understanding. This one, Luca said, pulling out a drawing dated 3 weeks ago. This is Riker meeting with Vincent Calabrese. He's the head of the Southside family. You've been trying to cut ties with them for 2 years because you said they're too violent, too reckless. But Riker has been meeting with them secretly, 4 times in the last month. Giovanni's jaw tightened. How do you know who Vincent Calabrese is? I listen, Papa. I'm always listening. Luca's voice didn't waver. I know what you do. I know your business isn't entirely legal. I've known since I was little. But I also know you've been trying to change, to go legitimate, to protect me from your past. The raw emotion that flashed across Giovanni's face, shame, pride, grief, all mixed together, was almost too intimate to witness. This can't be real, Giovanni said, but his voice lacked conviction. Riker has been with me since the beginning. He's saved my life, multiple times. He's my closest advisor, my friend. He's a traitor, Luca interrupted, his clinical tone returning. And he's planning to destroy you within the next 48 hours. The specific timeline made Giovanni's head snap up. What? Luca pulled out his tablet, the one he supposedly used for educational games. He opened a file folder and turned the screen toward his father. Photographs, screenshots, documents that made my blood run cold. I've been accessing Papa's computer remotely for 3 months, Luca said without shame. I know all your passwords. You use the same pattern for everything. 8 characters, starts with a capital letter, ends with the year. Once I figured that out, it was easy. Luca, Giovanni's voice was strangled. These are emails between Riker and the FBI. I've been talking with a hacker. He's the one that found out all of these. Luca continued, scrolling through files. He's been feeding them information about your operations in exchange for immunity. But He's also been altering evidence to make you look guilty of crimes you didn't commit, trafficking charges, money laundering on a scale you've never operated, murder. That last word hung in the air like poison. Giovanni sank onto Luca's bed, his face ashen. Murder? Who? 3 people, rival family members who died in the last year. The FBI thinks you ordered the hits. But look, Luca pulled up another file. These are text messages from Riker to Vincent Calabresi. Riker ordered those deaths. Then he made sure evidence pointed back to you. I watched Giovanni's world collapse in real time. The man who'd built an empire on control was losing his grip on reality itself. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he do this? Money, power, because he's tired of being second. Luca's voice was gentle now, seeing his father's pain. He's been moving millions into offshore accounts. Once you're arrested and your assets are seized, he plans to buy everything back through shell corporations. He gets your empire, your connections, your reputation, and you get a prison cell. Giovanni's hands were shaking. I'd never seen him like this. Vulnerable, crumbling, human in a way that made my chest ache. How long? He asked his son. How long have you been carrying this alone? Since March. 6 months. Luca's composure finally cracked, his voice breaking. I tried to tell you, so many times, but you trust him so much, and I'm just a kid who doesn't talk right and sees things wrong, and I was scared you'd think I was crazy. Giovanni pulled his son into his arms with desperate force. No. God, no. You're not crazy. You're brilliant and brave, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you felt you couldn't come to me. Luca sobbed into his father's chest, months of terror and burden finally released. I stepped back, giving them space, my own tears threatening to fall. After several minutes, Giovanni gently pulled back, cupping his son's face. You saved me, Sin. Do you understand? You saved us both. But it might be too late, Luca whispered. His plan is happening Thursday, 2 days from now. The FBI is planning to raid the house and your offices simultaneously. They have warrants based on false evidence. Once you're arrested, Riker disappears, and Vincent's family moves in to claim everything. Giovanni's expression hardened, the businessman returning. Thursday. You're certain? I hacked Riker's email 3 days ago. I read the full operational plan. Luca pulled up another file, showing detailed FBI raid protocols. 6 a.m., coordinated hits on all your properties. They're expecting armed resistance, so they're bringing tactical teams. The casual way a 12-year-old discussed federal raid strategies was surreal. Giovanni stood, his phone already in his hand. Anton, my study. Now, bring Dmitri and Marcos. He paused. And get me a line to federal prosecutor Sarah Chen. Yes, I know she's not taking my calls. Tell her I have information about corruption in her office and she has exactly 20 minutes to get here before I take it to the press. He ended the call and turned to me. I need you to take Luca somewhere safe. Out of the city. Right now. Papa, no. Not negotiable. Giovanni's voice was iron. If this goes wrong, if Riker realizes what we know, you're the biggest threat. You're the witness who can prove everything. But, Luca. Giovanni knelt again, holding his son's shoulders. I need you to trust me now, the way I should have trusted you months ago. Can you do that? Luca nodded reluctantly. Giovanni looked at me. There's a safe house, 2 hours north. Anton will drive you. Stay there until I call. If you don't hear from me by midnight... He stopped, his jaw working. If you don't hear from me, Anton has instructions. He'll get you both somewhere Riker can never find you. Giovanni... My voice cracked. What are you going to do? His eyes met mine, and I saw cold calculation mixed with fury. I'm going to make a deal, and then I'm going to destroy the man who tried to destroy my family. 30 minutes later, I sat in the back of an armored SUV with Luca pressed against my side, his tablet clutched in his hands containing evidence that could bring down an empire. Anton drove with grim efficiency, 2 additional security vehicles flanking us. Luca was silent, staring out the window at the city disappearing behind us. "He'll be okay," I said quietly, trying to convince myself as much as him. "Your father is strong." "I know." Luca's voice was small. "But I've read about men like Riker. They don't lose quietly. If Papa corners him—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. I pulled him closer, this brave child who'd been forced to be a warrior. My phone buzzed. A text from Giovanni. "Federal prosecutor arrived. She's listening. Whatever happens, keep my son safe." To not, "Thank you," not, "I'll call soon." Just a father's final instruction in case he didn't survive what came next. I typed back, "He's safe. Come back to him. Come back to us both." I stared at that message for a long time before deleting the last 3 words and just sending, "He's safe." The read receipt appeared immediately, but no response came. We drove north in tense silence, leaving Chicago's skyline behind. Luca's hand found mine in the darkness of the SUV, his fingers cold and trembling. "Calith?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What if I made it worse? What if by showing you, by telling Papa, I just made Riker move faster?" "You did the right thing," I said firmly, even as doubt gnawed at my own chest. "Carrying that alone was destroying you, and your father needed to know. But what if knowing gets him killed?" I had no answer that wouldn't be a lie. The safe house was a cabin deep in Wisconsin woods, surrounded by pine trees and the kind of isolation that would have been peaceful under different circumstances. Now it just felt like exile. Anton checked every room, every window, every possible entry point with military precision. 2 guards positioned themselves outside. Another monitored security feeds from a room that had apparently been converted into a surveillance center. "No one knows about this location except Mr. Costanza's inner circle," Anton assured me. "You're safe here." "And Giovanni?" I asked quietly, out of Luca's earshot. "What are his chances?" Anton's expression was unreadable. "Mr. Costanza has survived worse odds, but this—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Riker knows all his vulnerabilities, all his secrets. If he's desperate enough—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. 8 p.m. came and went. No call. 9 p.m. Nothing. Luca sat at the cabin's small kitchen table, his tablet open, refreshing news sites obsessively. I made him tea he didn't drink, made myself coffee I couldn't taste. At 9:47 p.m., his tablet chimed with an alert. "Breaking news," Luca read aloud, his voice shaking. "FBI raids multiple Costanza properties. Giovanni Costanza taken into federal custody. Details emerging." My heart stopped. Luca's face crumpled. "No, no, no, no." I pulled him into my arms as he dissolved into sobs. "We don't know what this means. Maybe it's part of his plan. Maybe he made a deal." "He's arrested, Calith." Luca pulled back, his face blotchy and wet. "They arrested him, just like Riker wanted. It's all happening, and I couldn't stop it." My phone rang. Unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello? Miss Romano?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "This is Federal Prosecutor Sarah Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Giovanni Costanza. He's asked me to inform you that he's currently cooperating with federal authorities. The arrest you're seeing on the news is theater, necessary to maintain Riker Volkov's belief that his plan is proceeding as expected." Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly dropped the phone. "He's okay? He's not actually—" "He's safe, under protective custody, and he's provided us with substantial evidence of corruption within our own office, as well as detailed information about Riker Volkov's activities." She paused. Your young charge's documentation was particularly compelling. The drawings, the photographs, the timeline, it corroborated everything Mr. Costanza told us and filled in gaps we didn't even know existed. When can we see him? I asked, watching Luca's desperate expression. Not yet. We're moving against Riker and his co-conspirators tonight. Mr. Costanza has agreed to wear a wire for one final meeting with Volkov. We need his confession recorded. Once that's complete, we'll arrange a secure reunion. Her voice softened slightly. He wanted me to tell his son, "You were right about everything. Papa is so proud of you." I relayed the message to Luca, whose sobs turned to shaky relief. There's one more thing, Prosecutor Chen continued. Mr. Costanza has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation into organized crime in Chicago. In exchange for immunity, he's providing evidence that will dismantle several criminal organizations, including elements of his own former operations. He's choosing his son's future over his empire. The weight of that sacrifice hung in the air. Thank you for calling, I managed. Mr. Costanza also asked me to tell you, specifically. She hesitated. He said, "Thank you for seeing us, both of us, when everyone else looked away." The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone with tears streaming down my face. Luca was watching me with ancient eyes. Papa's giving up everything, isn't he? Everything he built, everything he worked for. He's choosing you, I said softly. He's choosing a future where you're safe over a past that was destroying you both. Will he hate me for being the reason he had to do this? I knelt in front of him, taking his hands. Luca, listen to me. Your father loves you more than power, more than money, more than his reputation. You didn't force him to make this choice. You gave him the information he needed to make the right choice. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, processing. And Riker? He asked quietly. What happens to him? Justice, I said firmly. Finally. At 11:23 p.m., Anton's radio crackled to life. We couldn't hear the full conversation, but we heard Anton's response. Confirmed. Subject in custody. No casualties. He appeared in the kitchen doorway moments later. Riker Volkov has been arrested, along with 3 FBI agents on his payroll and Vincent Calabresi. The operation was successful. Luca closed his eyes, his entire body sagging with relief. And my father? He asked. Safe, unharmed, asking for you. Anton's stern face softened fractionally. He said to tell you, come home, Sin, it's over. The drive back to Chicago felt surreal. Dawn was breaking over the lake as we approached the estate, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed too beautiful for the darkness we'd just survived. Federal vehicles were parked throughout the property, evidence teams processing Riker's office, agents taking statements from staff. The fortress had been breached, but this time by people who were supposed to protect rather than destroy. Giovanni stood on the front steps, still wearing the clothes from yesterday, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. But when he saw the SUV approach, when he saw his son emerge, everything else fell away. Luca ran to him with abandon, all his careful control shattered. Giovanni caught him, lifting him despite his age, holding him like he'd held him as a small child. I'm sorry, Luca sobbed into his father's shoulder. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared and stupid and... No, Giovanni's voice was fierce. You were brave. You were brilliant. You saved us, Luca. You saved everything that matters. I hung back, giving them their moment until Giovanni's eyes found mine over his son's head. The look he gave me held gratitude, exhaustion, and something deeper. Something that made my breath catch and my heart race despite everything we'd just survived. He extended one hand toward me, an invitation. I crossed the distance and let myself be pulled into their embrace. This strange, broken, beautiful family that had somehow claimed me as their own. "Thank you," Giovanni murmured against my hair. "For protecting him, for believing him, for staying." "Always," I whispered back, and meant it with terrifying certainty. Federal agents worked around us, documenting the end of an empire, but in the center of the chaos, 3 people held each other and chose something better. Luca pulled back slightly, looking between his father and me with those 2 knowing eyes. He signed something small and quick, just for us. "Family." Giovanni's hand tightened in mine. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "Family." 6 months later, the Chicago Tribune ran a front-page story. "Costanza cooperates. Former developer's testimony leads to largest organized crime bust in decades." But I didn't read the article. I was too busy watching Luca blow out 13 candles on a beach in Northern California, surrounded by new friends from his special needs inclusive school who'd learned sign language just to talk to him. Giovanni's legitimate security consulting firm operated out of a modest office in town. No armed guards, no fortress walls, just honest work helping corporations protect their data and assets. We lived in a house with an ocean view, nothing like the mansion, but warm in ways that marble and perfection never could be. Luca had decorated his room with his origami collection and new drawings, families at the beach, his father laughing, me teaching sign language to his friends. Happy memories, finally. As the birthday party continued around us, Giovanni found me standing at the water's edge. "Regrets?" he asked quietly, his hand finding mine naturally now. No hesitation. "About which part? Losing my practice in Chicago? Moving across the country? Becoming involved with a former crime boss and his extraordinary son?" I smiled. "Not a single one." "I destroyed your life," he said, but without real guilt. We'd had this conversation before. He knew my answer. "You gave me a better one." I turned to face him fully. One with purpose, with family, with love. The L word still felt new between us, still fragile despite 6 months of growing certainty. His thumb traced circles on my palm. "Luca asked me this morning when I was going to officially ask you to stay permanently." My heart jumped. "What did you tell him?" "That I was waiting for the right moment." His dark eyes held mine with the same intensity they'd held that first day in his study. "But every moment with you feels right, so I keep hesitating because none feels special enough." "Giovanni, marry me." The words were simple, direct, completely him. "Not because Luca needs you, though he does. Not because I've rebuilt my life and you fit perfectly into it, though you do. Marry me because I love you, because you saw us when we were invisible, because you're the missing piece we didn't know we needed." I should have been surprised, should have asked for time, for space to think. Instead, I kissed him. Salt air and sunlight and the taste of new beginnings. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. "Yes to everything." Luca appeared at our side, carrying a small device, his communication tablet that he still used when verbal speech felt too hard. He pressed a button, and a recorded message played. "I told Papa you'd say yes. I'm very good at observing patterns." We laughed, pulling him into our embrace. Behind us, kids played in the surf. Birthday cake waited. A new life stretched out with possibility. Luca looked up at both of us, his smile radiant and free. Then he did something remarkable. He opened his mouth and spoke clearly, loudly, for everyone to hear. "Thank you for listening." 3 simple words that held 6 years of silence, 12 years of being invisible, and a lifetime of finally being seen. Giovanni's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. I held them both, my chosen family, my unexpected home, and marveled at how a single dance at a gala had led to this moment. Love, I'd learned, spoke every language, even silence, especially silence. Because sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that never speaks, until it's finally safe to do so. In a world that demanded he break, he stayed whole. In a father who'd lost his way, he found the path home. In a stranger who saw them both, they found family. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories are written in silence until they're ready to be heard. This is their story. A story of seeing the invisible, hearing the unspoken, and loving the overlooked. And it's only just beginning. If this story touched your heart, if Luca's courage moved you, if you believe in second chances and chosen families, share this with someone who needs to remember that being different isn't being broken. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate the extraordinary in the ordinary, the powerful in the quiet, and the love that saves us when we're brave enough to be seen, because everyone deserves to be listened to, especially those who speak without words.